Good afternoon. Through my role with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, I have the privilege of working with economic developers across the state of Colorado to develop regional strategies, which is why I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Greg Tehven, who has dedicated his life to his hometown of Fargo, North Dakota, a place where he wants to live. And he is passionate about sharing his community story with the rest of the world. Greg Tehven is a nationally recognized speaker who is known for his ability to bring innovative programs to rural communities that can be replicated by engaging the energy of youth and entrepreneurship. Greg has spent much of his life believing he can create the community you want to live in. He is the co-founder of Emerging Prairie, which is a digital media company committed to informing, connecting, and activating the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Upper Great Plains, including Sioux Falls, Bismarck, Minot, and Grand Forks. In addition, he's the co-founder of DinnerTies.com, 1 Million Cups Fargo, and Students Today, Leaders Forever. Greg teaches as an adjunct professor at Concordia College, and his current efforts to promote his region include co-organizing Startup Week in Fargo and curating TEDx Fargo. It's worth mentioning that Greg is not affiliated with an economic development organization, a chamber, or a city. He's doing this simply because he loves his community. Greg's passion and drive to promote his community is contagious, and I'm confident his story will inspire innovation across the state of Colorado. So please join me in welcoming Greg Tehven to the stage.
Well, thank you everybody for having me here today. It is an absolute great honor. Yeah, it's just a really exciting time. Colorado has actually changed my life twice in really significant ways. So it feels weird to come back and talk to all of you, and the state of Colorado has taught me a lot. When I was 17 years old, I went to Estes Park, Colorado to a leadership camp at Camp Chile. Has anybody ever been to Estes Park, Camp Chile? And I went to the National Leadership Camp there, and I realized two things. One is I think the girls in Colorado are a little cuter than the girls back home in Fargo. And I think it still holds true today, but based on what I've seen so far. And the second thing is I learned a lot about place and people from all over the country and the value of bringing people to come together. And so I think of like the great moments in my life and actually happened as a 17-year-old in Estes Park, Colorado. The second thing is the leadership of Brad Feld and what's happened in Boulder. I'm not sure I understand all of what he talks about because I don't understand exits and that big of numbers, but I do know that what's happened in Boulder and Colorado Springs and in Loveland, Colorado and Durango is something that we're watching back in Fargo. So I guess it's weird to me to be able to be here today, but I'm going to jump in. So today's talk is, there we go, exciting. The reveal, here it is behind the curtain. All right, so today's talk is about creating the community you want to live in. I'm pretty sure I could have also named it Fargo, Exceeding Low Expectations. Because when you are from Fargo your whole life, you get laughed at, right? How many of you have seen the movie, right? And we get laughed at when you travel around. People are like, have you seen Fargo? It's like, yes. They're like, oh my gosh, I love that movie. I'm like, do you talk like that? I'm like, you tell me, I'm talking to you. Or they're like, oh, you're from Fargo. Do you live in a teepee? It's like, no. And they're like, Fargo, North Dakota, we love Mount Rushmore. And I'm like, no, that's South Dakota. And they're like, oh my God, the bank. I love the bank. It's like, great. That's not us. And then like you travel and people are like, have you heard of the internet? And it's like, yes. And they ask you all these questions. And it's actually really, really frustrating because when you grow up there, people think you live like this. Or you live in a community like this where there's nothing there and there's Armageddon and you need to run and leave. And it's kind of funny unless you live in one of those communities. Because as I grow older, it totally affected my self-esteem. And I watched how it affected my mom. I'm a fifth-generation North Dakotan, and for my family's whole life, we've been laughed at because of where we're from. When I was in high school, I couldn't wait to leave because they talked about the brain drain. The best and the brightest were going to the coast. So I'm like, well, I'm pretty smart. I need to leave. And so I grew up my whole life in this amazing community thinking I was less than. I grew up thinking that I wasn't good enough because of my area code. I grew up thinking because I grew up on a farm with a gravel road, for some reason I grew up in the sticks and I was backwards and I wasn't good enough. And it actually has affected me a lot because I wanted to live in Vegas. Adventure and risk, excitement, the movies talked about, it's where you went when you were rich. But I didn't. I went to the University of Minnesota and had a great experience there. Started Students Today Leaders Forever because of that leadership experience in Estes Park, Colorado. I spent 7 years building what is now the popular buzz term a startup. We just thought it was an underpaid company where you didn't get paid. And had a great experience. Burned out like a lot of people do when you put your whole life into something. Wandered around the world for a year and ended up back in Fargo. I had a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship, $27,000 to study wherever I wanted in the world, and I had 1 year. And I got a job offer by a guy called Doug Burgum. Anybody here ever heard of Great Plains Software? It was an accounting software. He built it in Fargo, world-class company, and he has a lot of money, and I didn't. So he's like, Greg, I'll give you some of my money if you just make Fargo better. I'm like, all right, cool. And so I spent the last 3 years doing that, and with the commitment to make Fargo the greatest city in the world. And most people would say this is impossible because Fargo isn't a city. But I think it is. 200,000 people, that's a lot where I come from. My grandparents used to be my neighbors. I used to know everybody within a 5-mile radius. But now Fargo, it's coming. And so Fargo is an interesting place. So I've learned 3 critical things over the last few years. I'd love to share them with you. Maybe they're applicable, maybe they're not. But they're pretty simple. And I think a lot of community development is actually really basic. And so the first is to educate your city. When I moved back to Fargo, I thought nothing happened there. It was boring. And so I was like, what would happen if we created TEDx Fargo? TED is an event that celebrates bringing ideas to life. And so we had our first event. We were so excited. We got 100 people to show up. It cost us $5,000. And we were just like, oh my God, we made the budget. We had 4 speakers, an artist, a doctor. We had a farmer. And this guy, Doug Burgum. And this is the guy that built Great Plains Software that sold to Microsoft for $1 billion. He's the board chair of Atlassian. He was the board chair of SuccessFactors when it sold to SAP a few years ago. And we're talking about ideas and curiosity. And we got a little addicted to TEDx Fargo. That was February of 2012. We made the really bad decision of doing 3 of them in 1 year. That is not good. And then last year, we're like, let's fill the room up with 600 people. And so we did that. And we said, let's not just create an event with chicken and soft vegetables in a boring room. Let's do something interesting and exciting. And so we reimagined what the adventures would be before. So we got people to go out and do yoga on the rooftop. And we had our breaks in the back alleys. And last year, we had 800 people at our event. And guess who it's planned by? It's by these people. Not a single person has a title. There's no bank account. Well, there is. We have a fiscal sponsor, and that's a pain in the ass. But anyways, so these people, and it's doctors and nurses and students and dropouts. The guy on the far right is the head of economic development, Jim Garton. Love that guy, next to a middle school principal. We're on the team planning it. In the middle of that's the superintendent of our largest public schools on the planning team with a high school senior in his school. And we did something special for our community. 800 people showed up. We had 22 speakers, and we were doing something special for our community. And then the youth said, we want to do one. So then about 30 youth did an event, and they had an awesome day, and they planned it, organized, and led it. And it was all about creating a platform, about celebrating ideas. It was a ton of fun. And then one of the things in educating our city is we got this venture capital fund in town, and some of our entrepreneurs call them vulture capitalists, but that's all right. But they said, we want to educate our city about what entrepreneurship is all about. And so they had their headline speakers at the regional conference, and on the left is North Dakota native Rich Karlgaard. He's the publisher of a magazine called Forbes. And the guy on the right is Mike Cannon-Brooks, who's probably the most influential software developer in the world right now out of Sydney, Australia, 26 million people in their country. And he's got Atlassian, which is the fastest growing software company, and they're in Fargo. And Arthur Venture says, let's educate our city. Let's do a free event for our city. So they called up all the high school and middle school kids, had them come, filled up the theater, and 800 people came, and they did it for free. And they said, we want to educate our city about innovation and possibility. We want to bring in the thought leaders, and instead of just having like the 12 people on the table in the boardroom that it seems like in Fargo only the old white dudes to go to, they said, hey, let's get the whole room filled. And it worked. And then a group of self-organized learning groups are popping up in Fargo. So this is our design committee. Anybody seen the TV show Chopped? Right? So Chopped, really popular show. They say crop. So what they've done is they've created a design contest similar to a cooking challenge, and they're filling up the bar. They've done 13 of these events in different bars where they have designers compete, and they're elevating our design community in a massive way. And it's led by 3 friends. And they're bringing it around the Midwest. They'll be in Brookings tonight doing their event, and they're raising the profile of the designers. They don't have money. They don't have permission. They just want to do something that matters. And that's my challenge for all of you in your communities. When the best and brightest come to speak, who gets invited? How do we get those middle school students to attend? How do we make it interesting for them? How do we get my mom to sit by the technologist to talk about the problems in the hospital? When we educate our cities, we lift them up. I'm reading the book right now, The Triumph of the City, and it talks about what happened in Bangalore when IT opened up, and all of a sudden I teach in Bangalore, and you see this explosion of talent because ideas are contagious, and when they congregate and they teach each other, great things can happen. In our community, we have a self-organized learning group and mobile tech meetup, which is all about wearables. Like the fact that our watches are more powerful than our phones blows my mind right now. We got an e-commerce community. We have like 2,000 jobs in our community that's all in the e-commerce. And it's interesting to see what's happening. And people, when we can help and organize them and promote them and celebrate them, great things can happen. So write that down. Educate your city. Find ways to create platforms to get more folks in the room, and especially diverse groups of people. Because that infusion of the nurse and the designer, the artist and the technologist, it's fascinating. The other thing, infuse the arts, right? So the first one is educate your city. I think that's about economics and job growth. The second one is arts, and that's culture, right? And in Fargo, people wouldn't say we have any culture, but it turns out there is a ton of it. So we said, like, what would it look like to have dinner at midnight at an art gallery? And so we did, and what we did was we had an artist design this table, and we did drinks at 10 o'clock, best cocktails in town. We did food at 11, and a toast at midnight. We've done, I think, 14 of these now over the last 3 years. And we get young professionals there. We got the guy that just sold his company for $1 billion snuck in. It's kind of hard to be like, hey, Loris, like you got to pay, right? But it's been awesome. And people are showing up and they're having conversations. It's a very different type of relationship building. We don't allow cell phones, no business cards. It's just people sitting by each other. And I curate the table to make sure that interesting people are meeting each other so the Etsy artist and the lady that's got the craft store can meet and they can share ideas. It's different, it's interesting, it's painful, because on Friday when you're hungover and you go to work, it's miserable, at least for me, because I generally am. But the reality is it's that shared experience, and it's building community, and it's something people want to be part of, and they want to come. The other thing that we've had a lot of fun with, there's a group of guys that said, let's reimagine the alleys. Any of you have gross alleys in your community that you'd love to have cleaned up? Well, you'd love to have this project in your community. It's called Alley Fair. And what they did is they took this old beat-up alley, and this is normally gross. I should really get a before and after photo. They had an artist paint the tables. They brought in green space. They brought in tents and a band. They brought in a market and are doing hula hoop lessons. They've done this 3 times now, and it's planned by these folks. They don't have a degree in city planning. They don't have a degree in creative anything. They're just a group of friends that said, we want to do something special for our community. Now our city planners are looking at our alleys differently. It can make them human-focused versus other things. And it's been a ton of fun. I think about this. This is John Narum. He's the world's youngest yo-yo champion in the history of the world. He won it when he was 13. He's a college student. We have him perform at all our tech events. He was just on America's Got Talent. He performs with the violinist. They choreograph pieces together to make things interesting. If you go to just another technology conference, you're like, wow, I've heard this for time and time again. But when you bring a yo-yo guy in, it blows people's mind, and it's a ton of fun. The other thing, we have Corks and Canvas. This is super cool. It's kind of inspired by the Art Prize in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The first Thursday of the month in the summer, so it's like 3 of them because we only have summer for like 3 weeks, it feels like. These guys, they open up their retail shops, and artists design, and there's wine, and people walk venue to venue just out on the town. And what's interesting is people start chatting, and they learn about the arts, and they go to the fine art gallery, and it's accessible because they get to meet the artist. And it's making a huge difference. The other thing is we've thrown some parties in our community, and they're not fundraisers, right? Because how many of you, if you're really honest, are just sick of going to another fundraiser, right? I mean, I love philanthropy. I think it's super important, but the best parties in town should not be at philanthropic events or the college dorms. And I wish I could go to the dorms, but I'm old, so I can't go. So we started throwing our own party. We had a great Gatsby party because it turns out James Gatz is the 14th wealthiest fictional character of all times, according to Forbes, The Great Gatsby, and he's from North Dakota. And so when the movie came out, we had our own Great Gatsby party. And we had a bunch of fun, and we got people excited, and we did it just because. There was no profit motive. There was no ask. There wasn't a single sponsor. We did it just because we wanted to go to a great party. And then we convinced our newspaper the next year to let us do a Mad Men party at the Fargo Forum in their office, which that was super awesome because we got all dressed up and got excited. We got a burlesque dancer to come in, and Billy, the owner of the Forum, didn't tell anyone. And then she started dancing, and the employees were there, and they saw her, and that was not a good idea because some emails went out that weren't like good for us. And we had an open bar, and that cost me thousands of dollars because on average, people had 8.5 drinks, which isn't good. And that's a very expensive lesson. You don't have to go to college to learn that. But what ended up happening is a community started forming. And we started having fun. And we were doing things that were risky. We didn't know how they would go. There was no strategic plan. There was no big planning process. We just created the city we want to live in. It was a ton of fun. And then infusing the arts, there's a piano project in our community. I think it's in different cities across the country. It might have started in Denver where people just put pianos out, right? So one of our artists in town did this, and she met this guy, Greg. And Greg, when the piano started coming out, he just started playing away, and it turns out he was one of those guys on the Carnival cruises, like the piano guy. Has anybody ever been to see like those Carnival cruises? They look really expensive. Is it good? I'm gonna have to work my whole life to go on one of those. But so they get Greg, and he just comes out, and he used to do that. And we had a big technology conference last week, and so we had Greg come and play, and he wowed 400 people. Turns out Greg's homeless. He lives in a tent, but he's talented, and he has a gift to share, and we paid him really well. This whole concept of keeping the arts inaccessible, sometimes public art needs to become private, and sometimes private art needs to become public. And the whole concept of like asking artists to do something for free for exposure is just rubbish. As community members, as community leaders, we need to drive the arts. We need to spend way more money in the early days of an artist's career and get them a ton of money so they can do it, versus feeling like they have to earn their stripes and make it really hard. Artists drive conversation. Artists tell us where our communities are going. I don't understand how they work and how they think. I really don't get it. But I truly believe if we can bring the arts into the community, it just creates an amazing experience. I want to challenge all of you to infuse the arts. Bring arts to the people. One of our midnight brunches, we brought the ballet in the middle of it to perform for 3 minutes, paid him a couple $100. And it made Jake, the technologist, be like, I think I'm going to go to the ballet. That looks interesting. So how can we engage the arts in our community in non-traditional ways? That's a question for all of us. Build on your bright spots. I think a lot of things I see rural communities especially do is they want everything, right? So in the technology communities, like we want an accelerator and an angel fund, and we're going to get venture capital. Find your bright spots and build on them. Whatever they are, build on your bright spots. I don't think you have to have everything. Chip Heath, who's a Stanford professor that I studied under, he wrote the book Switch, and he talks about bright spots, and it's fascinating. Check it out. So in our community, we have healthcare. We got 3 great healthcare organizations. The smallest of the 3, Family Healthcare, which is the clinic that's affordable, they said, you know what, we have a small enough hospital that we could implement technology. So our bright spot is being nimble, and we can move, versus Sanford, which is this giant system. And so what they did is they created Health Pitch Fargo. And they put 15 technologists, doctors, folks that had efficient models to improve healthcare on stage, and each of them got 3 minutes to hard sell their idea. Well, last year, one of those organizations was Intelligent Insights, a real-time locating software company that helps hospitals track assets within their hospital to understand where patients are and where equipment is, right? And so Intelligent Insights was there, and now they rolled out their pilot at Family Healthcare, and they've scaled across the country. And if you promise not to tweet this and promise not to say anything, you're probably going to hear about this company, because if you've heard about the Ebola case in Texas, Intelligent Insights software is in that hospital, and they know where that disease has affected each person. And it's because of Family Healthcare in Fargo, North Dakota, piloting with Intelligent Insights that could potentially save an epidemic from sweeping across our country. That's interesting. So other bright spots. So this is Ryan. He was a college kid. He was one of those awkward kids in his dorms way too late on his computer. He wasn't playing Halo. It turns out he was learning how to build mobile apps. He couldn't get a job at Microsoft or John Deere in town, so he started a little mobile app company. He's now 24. He's got 60 employees, and they're the top 10 largest mobile company in the world. Or not in the world, in the country right now. And our community has a choice. Do we have to think that a profit has to be 25 miles outside of town? and use their products, or can we use our homegrown? And Jim Garten from our Economic Development Corporation is pushing our community to buy Myriad's products, because these guys are doing great things, and they're getting into wearables, and they're doing amazing stuff. They're 24 years old. As a community, it's our responsibility to champion them and tell them every reason why they can succeed. Or I think of these folks. They say Fargo's greatest assets is our people. So these folks have a project called Dinner Ties, where anybody coming through can go online and say, I'm coming to your town, I want to have dinner. And then these folks will host them in their home for dinner for free. We've had 57 dinners so far, random people meeting. They're getting on each other's Christmas card list. They're going to visit each other now. It's awesome. But all it took was inviting them into our homes, and we created a little website to do it. It's super easy. Next thing, Misfits. This is a bunch of really weird people. They travel around the world, and they're nomadic, and they picked Fargo to have a conference. So they brought 150 people to our community 2 years ago. They came last year. Another 200 people came. I think combined Twitter followers is like 10 million followers out of this group of people. And Fargo had a choice. Do we say these people that do things differently and don't have home addresses are bad? Or do we embrace them? And our community decided to embrace them. And so they come to our community. Our Economic Development Corporation, our Convention and Visitors Bureau didn't sponsor them. They actually bought a really overpriced website from them. And it worked, because now we have a tool called I Love Fargo that people can use and celebrate our community. And it's made a huge impact. They're bringing so much art and energy. It's fantastic. We got a rural community, so this is a dinner in the woods. This is out at a cabin. We got a group of people together. That Molly on the left's from Juilliard. She's an amazing chef. We said, hey, we'll pay you. Would you just make dinner for our friends in the woods? It was awesome, and these are young people that love it. Startup Weekend took this out of Boulder. It's been a huge success, so these are people doing it. Of course, you know the story. People come and build companies. The guy in the back right didn't shower the whole weekend, so that was awkward. But these folks were like coming up with ideas, and they're having a ton of fun. And these are folks that people don't think of that look like they'd be in Fargo that won. And this is the winning team from the first year. And they're presenting at Tech Cocktail in Vegas next week, and Meditex has a chance to improve healthcare. And Courtney won. She was at our Women's Startup Weekend on a scholarship, and she's a single mom. She's 21 years old, and she created an idea for a breast pump so you could lie down in this kind of table and be efficient, so you could use your phone and keep productive, because she was a single mom. She didn't have any time. Nobody would join her team. She ends up winning it. She gets the whole community behind her, and now she's got a real company, and she's moving out of poverty. That's awesome. And then 1 Million Cups, it's just this gathering of people that come and have coffee together. And so this is one of our first ones. It's in a blizzard. There's like 40 people there. The Plains Art Museum said, we'll host it for you. An entrepreneur pitches for 6 minutes. Then the community asks 20 minutes worth of questions. The final question is, what can the community do to support you, the entrepreneur, to improve your idea? And people are addicted to it. So we had the Fargo Brewing Company, our only microbrewer in town, speak, and we gave out free beer at the library. So that's illegal. That wasn't a good idea. But we filled up the room, and people loved it. And now we're driving 200 to 300 people every single week to have coffee together at 9 o'clock. This is happening in Colorado Springs, and I know that because one of my good buddies that's one of the top entrepreneurs just moved to Colorado. First thing he does in Colorado Springs is he starts 1 Million Cups there with his friends. And it's about just engagement. It's getting the suits and the shirts to connect and to be on the same team and to improve ideas. All this to say is, young people, all of us, we don't need a hall pass to change the world. I think so often we wait for permission, or we wait for our mom's approval. Like, believe me, my mom does not get me. And then we don't have to win an election, because leadership isn't just in the polls, it's day in and day out. And as young people, I think the millennials, as we come into the workforce and we come into the cities, we want to be part of something. We want to be part of creative things that aren't necessarily safe. And my challenge for all of you is to don't do what the folks in Fargo do, which is they all think it's their job to be the devil's advocate. And so when someone has an idea, they tell them all the reasons why something won't work. I want to challenge you when a young person or anyone comes to you with an idea and encourage them to think about all the reasons why they can work. Because that's what Doug did when we said, let's bring TEDx Fargo to our community, and now it's one of the top in the country. Or that's what Charlie from the Convention and Visitors Bureau did when we were doing 1 Million Cups. We have the biggest one in the nation. He said, let me help you. I think there's some mistakes that people make. They want to help, and so they say they want to sponsor. But sponsorship is bullshit. Don't sell the crowd. Don't exploit the users that are in the room. Love them, add value, care for them. Get the ideas out in the community. And when young people come and they want to do different things, get behind them. Look for the ways to support the alley fairs or the health pitch or the startup weekends. Remove the paperwork. Just give them the money and bet on them. Because that's what my generation was taught. We grew up in teams in the classroom. And we have the desire to make a difference in the world. Statistically, we're less motivated by money and more motivated by making a difference. And that's what I love about Colorado, because when I've spent time in Greeley and Loveland and Boulder, there's organizations that are truly trying to improve the human condition. That's exciting. So what can we do to support the ideas of the world? My challenge for you is to create the community you want to be part of. You don't have to overthink it. For 1 Million Cups, we've had 3 planning meetings in 37 weeks. It doesn't have to be death by committee. I want to tell you 3 quick stories about people that I think have made mistakes. The new mayor of Bismarck is excited about the youth energy. He's like, Greg, I'm going to form a task force, and we're going to get young people involved. Young people don't want to go into a task force. Or my buddy in Brookings says, we want to create Brookings, South Dakota to be the creative capital of the world. We're going to have a series of events during the week. He says to their Economic Development Corporation, do you think it'll work? And he's 3 months away, and they're like, you don't have enough time. And we've got this other industry thing happening that week. Scott went ahead. He has 54 events this week. It ends on Saturday. That Economic Development Organization had 3. They had 30 people total in attendance. Scott's got thousands of people engaged without a strategic plan, but just a bunch of people with ideas. And the last one is my story in Fargo. Jim Garton, the head of the Economic Development Corporation in our community, pulled us aside when we had our first idea to do a startup weekend. He said, how much do you need? And we're like, I don't know. He goes, let me write you a $5,000 check, no questions asked. He pulled us aside and he supported us. And then we pissed off the Chamber of Commerce because I was speaking too much, and we upset the university presidents because we were challenging their systems, and Jim pulled us aside. And he just brought us in. He had him in his home. We had us over for dinner in his home, and he just said, we love you. We want to support you. Community development and supporting young people, it isn't rocket science. It's actually the basics. It's loving people. It's kindness. And it's encouraging them to take risks. If we stifle innovation, if we stifle the spirit of a young person, they will leave. I could have left. I could have studied all over the world. But my community embraced me. And they found ways to lift me up and make my life a little bit easier. If you have people in your community that are doing great things, push them forward. Get behind them and just be a friend, because that's all they want. I love Colorado. You all have changed my life, and I hope these thoughts can help you think about your community different, to build on your bright spots, to infuse the arts, and to educate your city. It's going to be an exciting journey. Thank you.